Welcome to the Money and Mortgages podcast. I'm your host, Adam Coleman, accredited financial counselor and mortgage planner. Join me as I speak with fellow industry experts on all things personal finance. Welcome, everyone. This is Adam Coleman. With me today, I have Chris Mansky, president of Mansky Wealth Management and author of his new book, Outsmart the Money Magicians. And I like the tagline, maximize your net worth by seeing through the most powerful illusions performed by Wall Street and the IRS. So on this episode, we're going to talk a little bit about the book, but specifically one section that I liked was related to the 14 questions to ask before hiring a financial advisor. So, Chris, welcome to the show.
Thanks. I'm glad to be here. Appreciate it.
No, I appreciate you taking the time. So, well, before we jump into the questions, I guess tell us a little bit about you and the book.
Sure. Well, I write mainly to improve finance for everyone. And I think McGraw-Hill has published this book because the message is so needed right now when there's a lack of trust in great institutions, and there really is a lot of low-hanging fruit that we can pick and improve Wall Street for Main Street, improve Wall Street for everyone that works with them and works with us. Folks like me in the suit and tie, I really would like to see more trust and better interaction. And that's what this book is all about. But in addition to being an author, I run my own investment team in Houston, Texas. And we've been recognized as one of the fastest growing teams in the US by Advisor Magazine and by Advisor Hub. We manage somewhere around $600 to $700 million. And we take a lot of time and energy to make sure that the things that we consider to be the ways to improve Wall Street, we're doing it in real life.
Well, no, and you have kind of a tagline. It's like every month, every client, where you're actually sitting down with each client, not on like a semi-annual basis or annual basis. Maybe speak a little bit about that and what your thought process is there to meet with people that frequently.
Sure. So we actually don't meet with them. We offer communication that they can rely on. So they get at least a phone call from us every single month. It's impossible for one of our clients to say, man, it's been a quarter and I haven't heard from my advisor. And which really, that's the complaint that is ubiquitous in our industry. When the big behemoth, the Wall Street brokerages, when they do customer service surveys and satisfaction questionnaires, overwhelmingly, the issue is I haven't heard from my advisor. And so every client, every month is our mantra. And if somebody hires us, they can expect to hear from us on at least a monthly basis.
Nice. Well, I mean, I think that's a good segue. I think, like you said, you hit the nail on the head where there is this distrust with the industry for good reason. There's certainly some bad apples in the mix. There's no doubt about that. I think things are transitioning more in a better, positive way with a lot more transparency and a lot more options for consumers. But I think these questions will be a good kind of kicking off point for people that are either considering shopping around their current financial advisor, because you never know if you're working with somebody that's actually trustworthy. So if you need to look for somebody else or get a second opinion, these would be good questions to ask a different advisor. Or if you're just starting off in the process, just don't have somebody that you trust. I think these are very good things to obviously ask anybody that you're interviewing. So let me kind of go through these kind of one by one and maybe give a little bit of idea of what your thought process was behind each of these questions. And then we can kind of chit chat a little bit about each one. But the first one was you're hitting it, hard on the first one. So the question for the advisor is basically, this is coming from the consumer, is what's your full name and last four digits of your social security number? So walk me through that and kind of give the clients an idea of why that's the number one question, and then what you're trying to get out of that question from the advisor.
Sure. And you're right. It's right out of the gate. And it's important that way. The list of questions is in a certain order for a reason. And you know what? Before I dive into the thought process there, I do want to just quickly comment that my stance is a little different than what you just said, Adam, because I really don't think there are very many bad apples. I think that advisors, for the most part, are trustworthy, hardworking, caring people, and that it's more a case of the systemic issues. The system itself has bias and conflict that's built into it to where people, they need to blame someone, so they're blaming the human that they're talking to, but really there is a bias in the system that if they did things differently, if they set things up differently, then you would get a different result. And, you know, from my point of view, advisors, and I've talked to thousands of them and have coached them across the country, I think that they're wonderful people by and large, and they really want to do right by their clients. So, but when you're looking for a new advisor, this first question is a great one. And the reason you ask it is twofold. So the first part of the reason you ask it is because you're kind of putting them on notice. It's a hard-hitting question. What's your full name and last four of your social security number? And you get to see, how do they react? How do they talk with you? What do you feel in their response? Because if you feel like there's a genuine interest in you and taking care of you and being transparent and trying to be useful to you and to earn your business, well, that goes a long way. I mean, as animals, our first impression, it matters a lot. And that question helps to solidify what is the way that you're going to interact with this advisor. Because if you're going to work with the advisor for the next decade, the market will go down in that decade and you will have some tough conversations. And so you want to see how they react and what does it feel like when you're talking with them. And so it's kind of a touchy-feely reason. But opposite the touchy-feely side, there's a more practical side, which is with the full name and last four, you can look the person up online and see their credentials and see if they've had any legal issues, if there's any bad notes attached to their license. You can see that it's all very clear through websites like FINRA and the NASD. And so usually the advisor is going to be aware that, hey, there is a practical reason here. They're going to understand that there's a useful side to this. And lastly, for the advisors that, like me and you, that we just really want to do right by the clients, they know that this is a two-way street. Every advisor is going to ask for hopes and dreams and tell me about your kids and your religion and the charities you love. And, it's okay for it to be a two-way street. And that those advisors, they know that, and they'll answer with just this simple, transparent, oh, sure, here, let me give you the info.
Interesting. Well, I'll push back on one thing just because I'm curious of this one. So last four digits of the social, obviously that's going to be the biggest pushback. As far as I'm aware, and correct me if I'm wrong, to do like the broker check, you don't necessarily need the last four. You can get by with their CRD number. Is that right? Or is there some other search that you think is relevant where they do need the last four digits of their social?
No, you're right. You don't need the last four of the social. The problem is that a lot of advisors don't have that CRD memorized. They can't quickly provide it. And so to make the question a little bit more useful and a little bit, more touching them in a place where they really get to prove that they see that it's a two-way street, you're about to give them all your social security information. Why can't this be a two-way street and just be there for each other? So that's the reason for the number.
Gotcha. Yeah, and the mortgage side is very similar as well. Like we have a NMLS number that I think it's posted everywhere, so it's pretty easy to find, but it's a good one to do a quick background check for people too. I recommend the same thing for people. So, well, good. No, that's good information. Well, let's see. Number two is, how often do you expect we'll see each other face to face? So maybe talk a little bit about that. How often do you think is relevant? And maybe is there anything about that question that you're trying to allude to for the client to know a little bit better about the advisor?
Yeah, one of the things I'm trying to do is help the client to avoid a common mistake. Because a lot of times what clients do is they walk into the office and they say what they're looking for. And then the advisor says, that's what I provide. And so it's a lot better if the client can walk in the office and say, what do you provide? And then when the advisor offers that information, they can internally or later that evening, they can decide, is this what I'm looking for? And so this question is touching on that. How often will we see each other? And I think that there isn't really a wrong answer. except for a non-answer. So maybe some advisors will say, we'll see each other every quarter. I'm going to ask you to come in twice a year, once every 2 years, whatever the answer is, that is a systemic offering. They're telling you, hey, you're going to pay me a fee and I'm going to ask to see you once a year or whatever the answer is. But what you want to run away from is the non-answer. The advisor says, oh, well, I can see you whenever you want. Well, when do you want to see me? Well, that's not a service offering. Now you're just making promises. And there's no
Right.
way that you could make that same promise to every single client. In order to run a business, you're going to have some systems in place. And so it's a great way to avoid the folks who maybe are just starting out or the folks that are flying by the seat of their pants and get aligned with someone that really is going to follow through on the service that you're paying for.
Now, when you say face to face, obviously a lot of planners and advisors meet virtually. Do you mean physically face to face, or does virtual, like what we're doing here, does that count in your mind?
Well, I think that when this questionnaire was first written, it was before the epidemic and before the world of Zoom really touched everyone so intimately. And so the spirit of the question really is face to face, especially if they are doing that meeting where the questionnaire is being used. If that's a face to face meeting, well, then the idea would be, well, how often are we going to be doing this? And maybe the answer would be, well, we won't ever do this again. We're going to do everything by Zoom. And then they explain that to you. But the spirit of the question really is, we're shaking hands. When's the next time we're going to shake hands?
Perfect. Well, and I think the next one is very much related to that. I think it was, how often do you expect we'll speak with each other? So what do you view as the difference between those two questions, and what are you trying to get at on that one?
Well, it really is the same where you want to see that they have a system for communicating with you. Oh, well, I'll be calling you every quarter. I'll be emailing you twice a year. There's a difference between sitting down with somebody face to face, shaking their hands, and then other interaction. And so what does that other interaction look like? And again, there's no wrong answer except for the non-answer. You really want to avoid the advisors that are just trying to figure out what you're looking for so they can promise it to you.
And I think that probably does a pretty good job of weeding out the people that are more on the salesy product pushing side, that don't necessarily have a system in place from the relational standpoint, and
Very
more
much
on the
so.
advisory side. I'm guessing that's where you're kind of going with that, correct?
Yeah, that's right. It tends to push people into the arms of someone that is more relationship, customer service focused, as opposed to transactional and commission focused.
Right. And that's what we're here for. So you don't want to do this just on a one-time basis and then just not get help afterwards. So
Right.
let's see. The fourth question is, how quickly do you respond to a phone call that you've missed? So what's the right answer and what's the wrong answer on that one?
Sure. This is a touchy-feely one like the first one, because you're kind of setting them back a little. Hey, you've missed my call. How long is it going to take to get you to call me back? And I think that an everyday professional would say something like, well, I typically call back that day or the next business day. But sometimes you can see people get cagey. You can really see them get defensive, and you can get a good sense of, well, what about when I do call this person up because I feel like they have made a mistake or I feel like I'm unhappy with something? Are they going to be cagey with me? Are they going to give me a hard time? Or are they going to be open and interested and genuinely trying to work with me? And so it's a question that will help to guide you in evaluating that.
Nice. I like this next one. Number five is, how does my tax advisor fit into all this? So what's important there, and why do you kind of highlight the tax advisor specifically?
Yes. So it's important to find that they have a system in place. Again, you don't have to be an expert to know all of the details of what that advisor is going to be doing in coordination with the CPA. But what the advisor should be able to easily communicate to you is that the CPA is important in the process. And what does the process look like? So, for example, they might say, oh, well, we would make sure that your CPA has all of your tax documents connected to our portfolio. And we also make sure to sit down with the CPA during the summertime to just go over your overall situation and make sure they don't have any comments from a tax perspective. And that to me would be a very light, easy answer that describes a system. Documents get there on time and we sit down with them in the summer. But some advisors might respond with, oh, well, if you'd like me to talk with your CPA, I'm happy to. And that's not a system. That's just let me just say I'll do what pleases you, and there are some advisors that will have very in-depth systems. And the whole idea here is that you want to be sure that the tax strategy is included in your portfolio management in a meaningful way.
Well, and it hits to the comprehensive nature that a good advisor would have over somebody that's just specific to one product as well. So no, I think that's a great question to ask. So let's see. Number 6 is, what is your account review like? And may I have a copy of your typical account review agenda? So speak a little bit about that. What specifically are you hoping to see from the advisor when you ask that question?
Sure. So again, you're looking for process. The typical account review agenda, it probably has things like there's some work that has to happen before the client shows up for the meeting. There's some specific things you want to go through in every client meeting. And then there's some follow-ups that just generally are going to apply to every annual review that you do. And so that agenda, in describing it, when the client gets to hear about it, not that they have to understand everything, just that they can see like, oh yeah, there's a process here. But then what's really powerful is that then the advisor can say, let me just quick print off our typical annual review agenda for you and hand it to you. And the folks that can do that, they're not flying by the seat of their pants. They have a system in place. Maybe it's not the best annual review agenda in the world. Maybe it is. The client doesn't have to evaluate that. They're just looking to avoid the advisor who says things like, oh, I can't share my agenda with you. It's proprietary.
Right.
Oh, come on. We're not gonna even spend any more time doing the interview.
Yeah, or better yet, maybe they have it on their website too, that's already labeled out before you even talk, and you can kind of get that framework. But yeah, if
Absolutely.
they're not able to answer that question on the spot, that's a major red flag for sure.
Yeah.
Well, let's see. Number 7 is, how often do you expect you'll come to my home or office? So how do you view the difference between that and, I guess, number 2 or 3, where you're talking about how often we're going to meet? Where's the discrepancy there?
Yeah, so the difference here is that now the advisor is leaving their place of business and coming to you.
Okay.
And it is a really important question, because I think if you're talking with somebody who has a mature business and they've got experience, they won't be coming to visit with you
Right.
unless you really are an incredibly lucrative and special client. But the norm would be that if you fit into their practice in the way that you should, then that probably means that they're not going to get into the car and deal with traffic in the big city to come and visit with you, because it's too much time. In order for them
Right.
to run their practice well, you would come to them just like you would go to your doctor or you go to the lawyer's office. These professionals, they would expect that that you're traveling to visit with them where they have all their tools, where they have all the ability to be helpful to you. And in the day of Zoom, this question is a little less of a red flag. But I will say that there are some advisors that they will say, "Oh, I'll come anytime you want." That's a very scary situation. You probably don't want to work with that advisor. Or if they say, "We're happy to visit with you at your home or office for, anytime we're doing a review." Well, how are they really going to be able to keep that up? At some point, they're going to have enough clients that they need to be in the office working and not driving all over town to everybody.
Right. How do you differentiate the two, where you have maybe a very high-end client that could expect that higher, touch relationship where you do come see them face to face more often, versus somebody that, how does that person that might not necessarily qualify for that type of personalized service, how would they know the difference? I guess, is there a certain net worth qualification that you think, all right, I'm less than a million, for example, and this person's telling me they're going to come to my house every meeting, that's a red flag, versus, all right, I do have a pretty good high net worth, maybe this is normal. Like, how do they differentiate those?
Well, I think that what you'll find is that you're in the right place when you're going to their office. And the reason it works that way is because if the advisor works with people that have $10 million and you have $10 million, you're in the right place.
Right.
And all of those clients are, $10 million clients. And so you're going to go to the office because that's, that you're just like all the other fish in the school. And that's the proper way to be. What you don't want to be is so small that they don't care about you and so big that they're not used to you.
Right.
So it's much better that your professional relationship is appropriate. And what is appropriate, just like you go to a doctor or to a lawyer, is you go and visit them at the office.
Right. No, no, I agree. I don't see a whole lot of financial planners doing house calls nowadays. So let's see. Number 8 is, what financial designations do you have? So this is a big one that obviously is a hot topic item. Tons of financial planners have a million different designations and tons of letters after their names. So what's kind of your primary goal for that question?
Well, I try to just simplify it down for clients that there's one designation that is the industry standard for someone that's an investment planner, and that's the CFP. It's got the ongoing qualifications, the ongoing continuing education, the ethical requirements. There's a sense of similar to like a board certification for other industries. This is the hallmark. For people that are serious about this industry, they could have a lot of other designations, but they definitely have that one. And so, just to make it easy for folks, I suggest if you're not talking to someone that has a CFP, you'll find someone else that you really like and you'll get very great service from that does. So, probably that's better for you.
Are there any other specific designations for like specialty items that you think are useful, or does it really matter that much?
I think that with the specialty items, probably people will be aware of it because they're in that situation. And so they'll be looking for it because it's a unique, special circumstance, and they'll look for an advisor that has that designation. But in general, I don't think that the other designations, because there's a lot of them, like you said, the hundreds and hundreds of them, I don't know that a client should be expected to know what each one of them entails and what the qualification bestows experience wise upon the advisor. It's just easier to keep it simple with, hey, if you're going to work with a tax person, you get a CPA. If you're going to work with an investment person, you get a CFP.
Gotcha. Well, perfect. Well, let's see. Number 9 is, how many people directly support you or are on your staff? So what are you trying to get at for that question?
Well, I'm trying to help people to avoid the advisor who maybe is sharing a assistant at a brokerage firm. So it's me
Okay.
and the assistant that isn't really mine. I'm sharing it with 3 other advisors. And so when you ask them that question, you get a sense for, how much resources do they really have at their disposal? And when they answer with something that sounds like there's a lot of resources available, well, that's going to be a better situation than when someone says, "Oh, well, it's me and John." Okay, well, that's not what I was expecting to hear. Let's move on to the next question, and you can go from there.
How do you differentiate that on? Because I feel like part of that, they could get roped down the path of going to like a very large institution where they could claim that they've got a lot of team members versus maybe somebody that's more independent, like maybe not like a one person shop, but maybe one or two person shop. Do you see any other follow-up questions, I guess, to differentiate those two things to make sure that they're not getting put down a path of like working for a big bank or wirehouse, that they have a ton of people that work there, but they're not necessarily a team environment necessarily.
Yeah, I think that's where I'm counting on advisors to not say to a prospective client, well, working directly with me is these 7 people, because they don't work directly with you. They don't,
Right.
they're a shared resource for everybody. But I understand that in the world of sales, that's something that probably would occur. And I'm not really sure that there's a great way to see through that.
I almost think like another follow-up question would be, all right, if there's something that you don't know or a situation that comes across that you don't know the answer to, what would you do? And who would you go to try to get that answer? I feel like that sometimes comes up, or the fear comes up where it's like, all right, if I'm talking to one person, a one-man shop, if they have no knowledge of my question, how am I going to get advice? So if they have other people to refer to, then maybe that kind of gets them more comfortable with that one person shop or a smaller group, I guess I would say, not just a
Yeah,
one
that's a great
person.
question.
So, okay, well, perfect. Well, let's see. Number 10 is what type of investments do you use most often for your clients? So, what's a good and bad answer for that one?
Well, the good answer is one where the client feels like they're being talked with in a respectful way. And a bad answer is one where they feel talked down to, where they sense like all of a sudden the advisor became the professor and they're the student. And investing is what you're hiring them for. You don't need to be an expert as they're describing the investments. It could be that you really don't understand any of it, and it's fine, but you do know what it feels like when someone is talking to you in a way that is respectful. And so it's a great question, again, kind of on the touchy-feely side of just getting a feeling for the relationship that you're, possibly going to be in. This is a time where you can feel this is the way this person interacts. That when I want to talk with them about money, all of a sudden they're using words I don't know, and I'm lost. They can't even tell I'm lost. This is not going well, as opposed to somebody that, hey, I don't really know what that means, but I can kind of get a gist for it. And I understand they're talking with me instead of down to me, and I'm getting it. I understand, not that I'm an expert, but I understand what they're saying.
Right. No, no, that's perfect. I mean, at least you have that relational aspect of it and not just being talked at this point. So let's see, number 11. This is a good one, obviously a big one. How are you compensated? So obviously we could have a whole episode just on this, but what are the kind of the key highlights that you think somebody needs to take away from that one?
To just listen really well and take good notes and then think later about whether or not you feel like that's good. If you like what you heard, great. And if you don't, then there's plenty of fish in the sea. And if you don't understand, well, then that's a real red flag. They should be able to easily describe how they collect their compensation. And if you don't understand, then you want to go to somebody else.
Yeah, no, that's for sure. I think there's tons of different compensation models that all have their merits, but then it's the transparency and the being able to explain the differences is the key, I think, on that one. So let's see. Number 12 is if your office found out that I had a death in the family, what would you do? That's an interesting one. So what are you hoping to get out of that one beyond the touchy-feely? Because I know in your section it's not necessarily that's not where you're headed in this question. So what's your thoughts there?
Sure. So I think that a lot of times when people are looking for their financial advisor, they start to lean into people that they can feel like could be a friend. They kind of lean into, well, they're my age, they like the same things as me, they kind of look like me. Like I think I could hang out with this person. And not that that's a bad thing. It's good to feel comfortable with your advisor. But this question helps to highlight if the advisor is thinking the same thing, because you don't want the advisor to think that way. There are plenty of advisors that when they hear that question, they will say something like, well, I would probably send flowers. If I could attend the funeral, I would. If you need something from me, of course, you can count on me. And all of that talks to, I am a friend. I am here for you as a friend. And it does not talk to the professional service that the client is paying for. And so I think a good advisor would say those things, but a great advisor would say the professional work that is expected of them. And so that answer looks a little different. The great advisor would say something like, well, we would review insurance policies to make sure that beneficiaries are updated. If life insurance needs to be collected, I would help with that. Sometimes accounts get frozen when there's a death in the family, and I would help to navigate those waters. So it's a totally different answer. And I think that most clients are going to be better served by an advisor that looks to the professional service first. And obviously, if a friendship or if a personal relationship is developed over time, that's wonderful. But that's not what they're hiring you for. And so I don't think you want that kind of an answer when this question gets presented.
Perfect. Well, let's see. Next to last one, number 13 is, may I have a list of references, please? So what do you think is most important there?
Well, similar to, do you have a account review agenda that I could
Mm,
look at? Look, are there people out there that believe in you enough that I could call them and hear about, hear them sing your praises? And I've heard a lot of interesting responses to this question because advisors will say things like, well, my client information is private. My firm doesn't allow me to hand out client information. And that does not pass the common sense test. I mean, if the client thinks the world of you and you say, do you mind if I hand out your phone number to somebody that would like to hire me, and they say, oh, I would love for you to do that. I
right.
mean, there's no conflict, there's no problem with this. So if they don't have that readily available, it's just an enormous red flag, and you really don't want to work with someone that doesn't have a list of references.
Perfect. Well, let's see. Last one is kind of summarizes all this, I guess. Will you please email me stating that you are legally a fiduciary and that you'll contact me in ways that you've just described? Please courtesy copy your compliance manager in case I need to reach out to that person in the future. So, any specific issues with that? Like, what are you trying to hopefully obtain there?
Yeah, I think there's a couple things we want to do. So one is, if they've made some promises about the service that they provide or the way they're going to charge you, then let's put it in writing. And it shouldn't be the client's job to put it in writing. The advisor should do it for them.
Right.
And this doesn't have to be some really formal legal document. It's just a straightforward, hey, I said that I would contact you once a month. I said that I'd meet with you once a year. I charge 1% a year in fees, and there aren't any other fees. If there's something else you'd like for me to go over, just email me back. I'm happy to do it. I've also CC'd, John, who is the compliance manager here. And so now we're all on the same page. Now the client can read that and say, yeah, that's what I heard. They followed up with me. And so here's the next piece of that question is, they followed up with me. I was in their office and I got this note within 24 hours, within 48 hours, showing that they have their system together. They care about me enough that I didn't have to wait 2 weeks to get this, thing. And then the last piece of this is, you now have a direct line to the compliance manager. And if ever you did have a real question or concern, or there was something that you felt like you needed a second opinion on, you know who to talk to and you know how to reach out to them. And that's very nice.
Well, thanks, Chris. This has been extremely helpful. I appreciate you taking the time to go through all that. I guess before we wrap up, any final thoughts or any other top of mind questions that somebody should really be thinking of when they are trying to interview financial advisors?
I think it would be a great idea for folks to take seriously education on the subject of finance. And I think whether it's an advisor, a professional in finance, or just somebody who they've been saving and they're wanting to interact with Wall Street, it's worth it to add to your to-do list, your reading for each year, add a book. And there are some books that they're just famous now, like Rich Dad, Poor Dad and The Millionaire Next Door. Less famous, but I'm partial to it, is Outsmart the Money Magicians. I think that would be a great book to add to the reading list because it talks specifically to this subject. But there are others too that once you get one of them on your audio device, or you get one and you're reading that softback or hardcover book, you'll find that Amazon is suggesting other books like it. And it's easy to just add one book a year and just make sure that you're staying in touch with this subject that does really touch us all.
Kind of speaking more to your book, what's the main group? Is it mostly for those kind of initial early DIY investors to kind of get into it, or is there a different subsection of people that you think would be a good fit for that?
Well, I think that if somebody's nervous about the debt of this nation or where our policies are going as a country, then Outsmart the Money Magicians talks to them. If they're a professional on Wall Street in finance, especially if they're a CPA, insurance agent, or financial advisor, then Outsmart the Money Magicians is almost like a blueprint for them to raise the bar and get more business and get more clients. And for people that are wanting to work with Wall Street, they have an investment account, or they're considering hiring an advisor, or they want to change advisors, this is a wonderful kind of behind the scenes education on avoiding the problems and getting really a system that's right for you and getting that in place.
Perfect. Well, I'll be sure to include the link to the book and make sure that that's in the description as well for people to check out. If somebody would like to learn more about you and your firm, where are some other good places for them to go?
Sure, you could just Google my name, Chris Mansky, and I mean, it fills up the page with stuff like my website at the company and my LinkedIn profile and a lot of different YouTube videos, as I've been on numerous podcasts and done a lot of talks that were recorded, in ballrooms and auditoriums. And so it's an easy way to find me is just Google Chris Mansky.
Perfect. And I'll include the link directly to your website in the description as well so that people can track you down. But Chris, I really appreciate you taking the time.
Adam, this has been great. You make this really easy. Thanks for the conversation.
I appreciate it. These are all great questions. So I'll make sure to post all those in the YouTube and on the podcast. So definitely hope everybody checks it out and uses them because I think it's definitely good research for people that are thinking about getting a financial planner. So I appreciate it and certainly wish you the best.
Thank you so much.
All right. Thanks, Chris.